Outnumbered 10 to 1 in enemy territory, the commander-in-chief faces the awesome decision of ordering a military solution. Two weeks since the Iraqi invasion, and 50,000 U.S. troops are digging in along the Saudi border. Saddam Hussein counters, declaring all foreigners inside his territory will be detained and placed around military installations as human shields.
That just absolutely infuriated the president.
Blatant hostage holding. I cannot tolerate, nor will I, another Tehran. I am determined in that. It may cost American lives, but we cannot sacrifice American principle or American leadership. George Bush, journal entry, August 17.
The commander-in-chief knows Saddam Hussein has committed unspeakable acts. His scientists have stockpiled chemical weapons. They are working on an atomic bomb.
These weapons of mass destruction had a real appeal to Saddam Hussein, or just the idea of it, he could create the impression that he had them.
U.S. troops are outfitted with gas masks, protective bodysuits, boots, and gloves. By October, more than 200,000 are in the line of fire, outnumbered 2 to 1 by Saddam's army. The commander-in-chief turns to his military for options.
This was planned by people who really didn't want to do it.
The reason for that was because, in the judgment of the commander in the field, he didn't have enough troops to do anything else.
The president orders his top soldier, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Colin Powell, to Saudi Arabia. He wants Powell and Schwarzkopf to spell out exactly what they need to win a war.
Not send enough force so you're almost sure of winning, but send enough force to make sure it will happen, that there is no doubt. Well, war is full of doubt.
The ghosts of Vietnam. Now, names on a wall. The commander-in-chief would have to face down the demons of America's past in order to prevail in the Persian Gulf. The Vietnam Syndrome, committing power and prestige to an intractable conflict. Like walking into quicksand, slowly sinking, with no means of escape.
I said, I know you know this, George. I said, but this situation has all the elements that have brought down other presidencies. Body bags, $40 oil, and all of these other potential adverse developments. And his answer to me was, I know that, Jimmy. I know that very well, but we're going to do what's right.
The first order: fight this war to win, and win big. The commander-in-chief had asked his top military brass what they would need to crush the opposition.
They came back and said, well, we want another Marine division. We want the 7th Corps out of Germany. We want the Big Red One out of Fort Riley, Kansas. We want 6 aircraft carrier battle groups.
I have today directed the Secretary of Defense to increase the size of U.S. forces committed to Desert Shield to ensure that the coalition has an adequate offensive military option should that be necessary to achieve our common goals.
In a matter of weeks, the United States would have more troops on the ground in the Persian Gulf than it had ever had in Vietnam. The commander-in-chief is no longer playing defense. He's digging in for war.
And we have an opportunity to stay the course with sanctions.
Short of Congress decides whether to make war, so the bullets start flying, 90% of the casualties...
Talk's not truth! Talk's not truth! Talk's not truth!
Talk not truth.
We underestimated the reaction.
There were those experts, so-called experts, who were going up to Congress, testifying on Capitol Hill, claiming there are going to be 10,000 Americans come home in body bags and so forth.
We stand on the brink of catastrophe.
It is not their sons and daughters who will do the dying.
How many body bags is it worth, Mr. Secretary, to do this, to eject Iraq from Kuwait and all that kind of stuff?
On Capitol Hill, Congress launches televised hearings on whether sanctions would eventually force Saddam out of Kuwait. But with the doubling of the American forces in the Gulf, the die had been cast.
President Bush kind of led us to the point where we were either going to have to respond very aggressively militarily, or we'd have to pull back. And at that point, you really couldn't pull back.
Sanctions take time. Maintaining a fighting force 500,000 strong takes billions of dollars by the month. They could not stay there forever.
In a sense, you made yourself susceptible to blackmail by Saddam Hussein.
If he had said, I will leave, and I will leave unconditionally, and made a public statement to that effect, and then just delayed his departure and drug it out, we would have been hard put to go do what needed to be done.
The kids look so young, and yet they're gung-ho. I am convinced more than ever that we can knock Saddam Hussein out early. I'm worried that the American people might think this will be another Vietnam. But it isn't, and it won't be. George Bush, journal entry, November 22nd.
The draft resolution has been adopted as Resolution 678.
November 29th. The UN Security Council passes Resolution 678, demanding Iraq withdraw from Kuwait by January 15, 1991, or else. The clock is ticking. The Commander-in-Chief has set a course for war, but employing overwhelming force is a gamble. He's left his enemy with a means to escape. Christmas in the desert. The American commitment in the Gulf will soon be bigger than it ever was in Vietnam. The Commander-in-Chief spends Christmas Eve reading letters from the families of those he has placed in harm's way.
Take care of my kid. Please, don't shoot. It's not worth dying for gasoline. And on it goes. But the cry is, save my boy. Save my boy. And I sit here knowing that if there is no movement on Saddam's part, we have to go to war. George Bush, journal entry, December 24th.
On the one hand, he's hoping that the cup of combat, he won't have to drink from it. On the other hand, he knows that that is the best way out at this point.
6 days before the UN deadline for Iraqi withdrawal, Secretary of State Baker meets with Baghdad's Foreign Minister Tariq Aziz in Geneva. The Commander-in-Chief takes one last stab at a diplomatic solution.
That was probably the longest day of his life, just waiting.
Bush was fearful that the diplomatic card might work. And if it had worked and there had been this delay and Saddam had kind of strung things out, the pressure on the United States would have been immense. And he could have, Saddam conceivably could have won that way.
Baker and Aziz meet for 7 hours, staring each other down and saying very little.
For one last effort, he took a letter to deliver to Aziz to take to Saddam Hussein. Tariq Aziz wouldn't even accept the letter.
He stiffed us completely and entirely, basically said, to hell with you. What will be, will be.
There is no way to describe the pressure. It's 9:45, the night of the 15th. The reports from Baghdad are defiant. Their faces smile and they chant. And I think, oh God, save their lives. George Bush, journal entry, January 15th.
He had been sent into war himself nearly 40 years before. A bomber pilot shot down in the South Pacific. 2 of his crew lost at sea. Memories of war lead the combat-seasoned veteran to his Air Force Chief of Staff for reassurance about the hours and days ahead.
I sort of sat back and watched these 2 fighter pilots talk about the air war. And General McPeak was able to lay out for the president, we'd already briefed him formally on what the plans were and so forth, but to give him that sense of confidence.